All right, for y'all who were asking how to do this thermal fuse replacement on the Secura pressure cooker, unplug it, flip it over, take these two screws out, and then you can pop this bottom off. There's the thermal fuse right there. You unscrew that Phillips head to pull this off. Now when you take that thing off, take note of the fact that there's this little square washer that has to go back there when you reassemble it. But anyway, you can slide that clamp bracket off, and then you want to slide the silicone sleeve off so that you can cut the wire closer to the fuse. You don't want to necessarily cut it way out here. So I slid the silicone off, and you can kind of feel where the wire connects to the leg of the fuse, and you're going to cut that with a pair of wire cutters there and there. Now I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to show you with some wire what you're going to do next. But you're going to wind up with these two wires cut with free ends. So assume these are the two cut ends of that wire from the pressure cooker, and you're going to strip those wires back, crimp on some spade connectors, crimp some spade connectors onto the fuse, and then connect it back together. And then in the future, when you need to change out this fuse, you can just use those spade connectors, so you don't have to do any cutting and soldering. You can use this kind of tool to strip and crimp. It'll work, but it's better to use a dedicated stripper and a dedicated crimper. You'll get better connection that way. So I'm going to strip back about a 1/4 inch of that wire with the wire put in the proper gauge hole in the stripper, which is the 14 gauge, just there. Now I've got a good strip. If you use the wrong tool, you could fray off some of these wires, and you don't want to do that. When you're crimping, when you're stripping wire, you don't want to damage these individual strands. You want all of them to stay. So use the proper tool with the proper size hole and get a good strip. Your crimper's color coded. I'm going to use a blue ring terminal just for demo purposes, not a spade terminal, just to show you that you want to use the proper color coded jaws of your crimper to make the crimp. Now the amount of insulation I strip back, there's no wire coming out the end right there, and you want just a little bit of wire showing. So I'm going to strip a little bit more. There you can see I've just barely got a little wire showing, so I can go ahead and make that crimp. I've got that terminal in the blue color-coded jaws, and I'm using my ratcheting crimper here to crimp down. Now I've got a solid crimp there. I ratcheted that down as hard as I could, and if you feel any motion at all here, and you tug on this, you've got to redo it. You've got to cut that off and start over, or possibly take another pass on there with the crimper, but that needs to be tight. That's important in this application because we're dealing with resistance and heat. And we want that connection to flow electricity properly. We don't want this to be a point of high resistance and generate heat. So just assume that was a spade terminal. And I put another spade terminal on the other wire. And then I would also crimp a couple of spade terminals onto there. If I put male on here, I'd put female on here. If I put female on here, I'd put male on here. It doesn't matter. You just want to put, the opposite kind of connectors. And then you can just connect these together with your spade terminals. Actually, I think I'll just go ahead and demo this for you properly. I'm going to go ahead and use some spade terminals to show you exactly. So I crimped that spade terminal on. Just assume that was one of your red wires that you'd cut, right there. Put a spade terminal on that wire. Make sure to have your silicone sleeve all the way down on the other wire so you can slide it onto the fuse once you get the... Actually, that's not correct. I'll show you what I mean. Now take your fuse. Since I put a female on here, I'm going to put a male on the fuse. And I'm going to crimp that together. Now look at that. That's loose. That is not a good crimp. So you have to make sure you get a good crimp, and this is tight. That fuse diameter is too small to get a good crimp. So you have to take and cut off a little piece of wire and insert these together into your connector so that you'll get a good crimp. Hopefully you can see I've got stranded wire coming through there and the end of the fuse. And that should give me a solid crimp. So that is a super solid connection right there. And I'm just going to cut that off because I don't need it. Now once you've got one connector on your fuse, slide your silicone sleeve on there and then make your other connection at the other end. Now just pretend this was one of the red wires inside the cooker that you've put a spade connector on. And now when you need to change out the fuse, you can just plug it in and unplug it. You don't have to do any future cutting or soldering because you've put spade or blade connectors, female on one side, male on the other side. You got your silicone sleeve back on there, and then just put that back up in the mounting bracket and tighten it down.